In this video, we'll be looking at HTML class attributes. Now, in one of the previous videos where we discussed about the HTML attribute, I said that HTML attribute are additional information that comes with an element. Where we use the anchor element as an example, the additional information that came with it is the href attribute, and we use the image element also, where we saw the src, the source attribute, and the alt attribute. So this element, this information, this attribute comes by default with this element, but there are other information you can add to an element, additional information, especially when you want to style them, or maybe you want to use them in JavaScript. This attribute, this additional information you use are very, very crucial. So in this video, I'm going to be telling you what the class attribute is and what the ID attribute is. Then I'm going to give you a difference and how you can use both of them. Actually, they do the same work. It's just like you want to use MTN and Airtel or Glo. You can use it. They all perform the same tasks. It just depends on what you want to do, anyone you want to use. It just depends on your choice. So now, talking about the class attributes, when we get to CSS, where we'll be styling our element, various elements, this is where this class and ID attribute will come in very, very handy in our CSS. So I'm just going to go to my VS Code just to give you a brief illustration of what I'm saying. For example, now we have three elements here. We have the P element, we say P element hello world. We have the span element, we have the div element. Now these are elements by in my VS Code. I want to add a class attribute to it. Why? Maybe I want to style this P element. Okay, I'm going to copy this P element. I'm going to copy it and I'll paste it anywhere, but let me just paste it under. So I have two P elements in this my work, in this my HTML document. Now let's say, for example, now I want to style only the first P element. All I need to do is, meanwhile, when you are styling an element, there are three ways through which you style an element. We have the inline styling, we have the internal styling, and we have the external styling. But not to worry, when we get to CSS, you understand what these three type of styling actually means. But I just want you to give you an example. So let me say, when you want to add a class, an additional attribute to an element, you add it from the opening tag, not the closing tag. So you go to the opening tag here, you give space, then you want to add a class, you just say class, enter, then you now write the name of the class. Maybe I want to give this class, I can say first P. I can give it a first P element. So this is what I choose to give it. Now you can give any element any kind of name you want to give, any type of name you want to give an element, you can give it. But for the sake of to understand what you are doing, give it a name peculiar to what you are doing. Let's say maybe I'm working on a menu. I want to work on a menu, a nav bar, and I have a series of lists. I have the main, the home, the about, the contact, the blog, and all those things. Maybe I can give each of those list items name associated with those nav bar items, so that it will be easier for me to understand. So always, whenever you are giving class name to your element, give them names that are suitable to what you are doing, so that you'll be able to know what you are doing, and you always remember whenever you come back to your code. So that is here. Now I have given this a class of first P element. Now I can okay, let's say maybe now I want to style this P element. During styling, you just use the class name to style, or use the element itself to style. In a situation where I want to use the element name to style, when I call this P element to style, don't worry about what I'm saying. When we get to CSS, you understand it better. When I use this P element now, when I call it to my CSS wanting to style it, whatever I give to this P element, it will affect the other P element. So if I want to give this particular first P element a style that I don't want to appear in the second one, all I need to do is to use a class. I will give it a class name, then use the class name to style it. The browser and the VS Code will understand that I am working on this particular element. So that is what class attribute does, but you understand it better in CSS. So what I just want to do in this video is just to give you the difference between the class attribute and the ID attribute. So now another thing you need to know about class is that you can give a particular element as many class name as possible. Now when I want this first P element, now let's say I want to give it another class name, I'll just give space inside the quote. Do you get? Inside the quote I can give it another element. I can say I can just give it, I don't know what to call it, but let me just say example. I can give it another one. I will just say space again. I will say book, space again, as many as possible. Do you get? Now when it comes to ID now, just take a instance, your national identity card or your national identity number. It is only peculiar to you. No one else can use it except you. You are only recognized by your ID. It is peculiar and unique to you. So that's what happens to ID attribute too. When you give an element a name, an ID name, it only takes that name. No other element can have the same ID name. For example, now in class, now I can come here in this my span element. I might want to give it a class name. I can still give it a class name of book. It can have the same class name with other elements. That's in a situation whereby I want to give all of them the same styling. I can give them the same class name, use that class name to style them. So now, but in ID is very unique. If I should give it an ID name, I cannot give another element that same ID name. So that's what the difference between this ID and class name. Now when I want to write ID, I don't write it inside the class element. I can give an element a class name, and I can also give it an ID name. So if I want to write ID, this is how I do it. I just say ID, enter, then I'll now give it pen, maybe, for example. Now this pen is peculiar to this span element. No other element can have an ID of pen. No other element, only the span element. Then the other elements, I can give them their own ID too. No other element will have it. So that's just the difference between the class attribute and the ID attribute. Additional information given to elements. So that is it.